Can perceived threats cause the same level of emotional distress as a physical threat? Could a rubber band cause the same amount of stress that a bear could? Well, yes, as long as the person truly believed that the rubber band was just as much a threat as the bear was. Humans are so much more complex than a simple, that scares me, that causes danger, I should be scared. According to the National Institute of Health, the purpose of fear is to alert the body of danger, to keep people alive in a dangerous situation. According to Leanna Zanette, a PhD professor at the University of Ontario's Department of Biology, she did a study on how birds react to predators. They were put into a state of hypervigilance, which helps them escape a predator. They were triggered by a survival instinct from fear that would allow them to escape that predator. Fear is used to help people escape a threat to their life, or more importantly, what they believe a threat to their life is. Fear specifically causes emotional distress, and emotional distress can be defined as an altered state of body, mind, or ability. An altered state of body, as defined by the National Institute of Health, can include an increased blood pressure and an increased heart rate, what we typically assign to fear. According to Zanette, the altered state of mind is the hypervigilance that is triggered, which can also be defined as a sort of tunnel vision, where your brain is unable to focus on any other task other than escaping the danger and surviving that danger, and you're incredibly aware of everything that has to do with survival. And the altered state of ability, specifically what I'm referring to, is when you are prevented from doing an action your body perceives as dangerous. Like when you're looking over a ledge and you feel your stomach drop and you don't want to move any further, is because your body is trying to prevent you from falling. It is trying to prevent you from doing something dangerous and hindering your ability to do so. The first disorder that shows that not only physical threats cause this emotional distress is PTSD. According to the National Library of Medicine, PTSD is when the sufferer is traumatized by an event that feels reoccurring. This causes spouts of extreme emotional distress when they are triggered, even if the trigger themselves is harmless. Again, Leanna Zanette was studying birds and how they reacted to predators. However, she also played them sounds of the predators while the birds were perfectly safe. This still triggered a state of hypervigilance. Even though they were safe, because they were reminded of a dangerous situation, they still were entered into a prolonged state of hypervigilance and fear. But when we most think of PTSD, it is mostly tied to its relationship to military veterans. Rahel Pearson studies how veterans are disproportionately affected by PTSD because they are put into so many high-intense combat situations that impairs their psychological function in the long term. Because they are put into such a state of prolonged hypervigilance, on a constant state of anxiety because of what they experience. Because they experience such a threat to their person, they are constantly in a state of anxiety and trying to survive, even though they are safe in the present moment. However, this can happen to anyone as long as they believe that there is a threat to their life. Trond Ayer, a Norwegian psychiatrist and military physician, studied people who were victims of the 2011 Oslo bombing, which was a domestic terrorist attack in Norway. And he found that 95% of people who developed PTSD had believed that their life was in danger. So people who experienced the exact same events did not develop PTSD because they did not believe that their life was in danger, which proves that fear does not have to do with the level of danger, but just the level of danger the person believes that they are in. Another disorder would be specific phobias, which, as Merv Demir defines them, Merv Demir, a research assistant at Stanford University School of Medicine, defines specific phobias as a persistent, continuous fear of a specific item or situation that impairs daily function. In her paper, Merv Demir describes phobias as being disproportionate by their very definition, because in order to be a phobia, you have to have a disproportionate fear reaction to what you are exposed to. However, just because it's disproportionate does not mean that the sufferer is faking it, as there are measurable physical symptoms that are seen when someone has a phobia and they're exposed to it, specifically elevated heart rate. This picture is of Jackie Kelly in her interview with BBC. She was hooked up to a heart monitor and interviewed. Her resting heart rate was around 70 beats per minute. However, Kelly had a severe fear of feathers, and just off screen, a feather was revealed to her on a platter. Her heart rate immediately elevated. She immediately began to hunch her shoulders and protect her body. Her heart rate doubled to 143 beats per minute in seconds. This shows that just because feathers are completely harmless, her body reacted as if it was a real threat, just because her brain perceived it to be so. Social anxiety is the final disorder that shows that things don't have to be physically dangerous in order to cause distress. Franklin Shiner, a psychiatrist at the New York State Psychiatric Institute, defines social anxiety as a fear of embarrassment, humiliation, and failure. However, these are just social constructs, and contrary to the popular belief, you cannot die of embarrassment. But this does not stop people from feeling physically horrified. Social anxiety can impair people's ability to do things because of the emotional distress it causes. Michael Cohen, a senior researcher in the Department of Psychology at the University of Chicago, shows that students with social anxiety had lower test scores. This shows that because they were so aware of the social situation they were in and the hypervigilant state, they were unable to complete the task in front of them, even though it had no tie to their actual ability to complete the task. It was just because of their environment they were in, they were unable to do it. This does not just affect testing though, it can also affect people in the sporting field. Michael Thompson, the lead columnist in the New Yorker, describes how Simone Biles did not compete in the 2020 Olympics. She is the most decorated gymnast, and some may argue, the best solo athlete in the world. It had nothing to do with her ability to physically compete in the Olympics. It entirely had to do with how she lost faith in herself and her fear of failure because she was so scared of the social constructs surrounding the Olympics. She was unable to compete and was physically hindered from competing, even though there was nothing actually preventing her, because the fear of social constructs leads to emotional distress, which can lead to a hindered performance. The effects of PTSD, specific phobias, and social anxiety show that perceived threats can cause emotional distress. Fear-driven emotional distress does not stem from true danger, but rather the danger one believes there is. The level of emotional distress relates to the level of perceived danger, not strictly the level of danger. Someone can skydive and feel perfectly calm, while Jackie Kelly was paralyzed by a feather. This is because the skydiver just believes it's an emotional thrill and do not think they will die, while Jackie Kelly inherently felt some deep fear of that feather.
All right, so my first question for you is, how did you approach and synthesize the differing perspectives in order to reach a conclusion?
Because I was dealing with so many different disorders, with social anxiety and PTSD and specific phobias, I really wasn't entirely sure how I was going to combine them all. So I leaned really heavily into emotional distress and divided into the three categories of the altered body, which could relate to the PTSD in the Jackie Kelly case, and then altered mind, which relates to the hypervigilance described by Zinette and found in the veterans with their impaired psychological judgment, and then the altered state of performance, which can be seen in the social anxiety and how people, and how from Marcus Thomas's, how Simone Biles was unable to compete. So by differing up the different things that fear can do and how it is triggered by the survival instinct as seen in the National Institute of Health, I could tie all of these disorders specifically to how they affect fear and the emotional distress in it in order to tie them together into a complete message.
Okay. And what additional questions emerged from your research? Why are these questions important?
I really wanted to look into specifically what a real fear would do, because I had a few examples on the same as a bear would have, and I wanted to look into a little bit on what real fear would do. However, I then ditched it because I decided that it was more important to delve into the psychological effects of what fear was for my presentation rather than divulge into what fear could do in a physical setting.
Okay. Thank you. You can raise your hand.